false identity that was imposed on us was that at the time when the British enslaved India, Hindu society had fallen to the lowest depths of moral degradation. So they talk of sati pratha, they talk of widow burning, they talk of various other things, and try to project that Hindus were a morally degraded kind of society at that time. The reason behind this is completely different. Why they felt necessary to do this? As I told you, the British East India Company came into India initially with the idea of only making money. They wanted to trade and make money. So initially, they had not given permission to the British missionaries to proselytize the locals in India. And the missionaries were very keen to get this permission. So they started this campaign to influence the public opinion in the UK or in Britain. And the public should put pressure on the government, and government puts pressure on the East India Company to allow the missionaries to continue with their activities in India. So to put pressure or to convince the people of England that missionary work is necessary and important in India, they projected Hinduism as a very, very degraded kind of religion. And they tried to convince the people that to save the Hindus from these inhuman practices, actually missionaries should go there and save the Hindus from this morally downgraded, degraded religion that is Hinduism. And just to convince the people, they blew up these cases of sati. Their own survey, East India Company's own survey, had found out that there were 4,000 cases of sati in 10 years. So about 400 cases per year, which also is very bad. I'm not saying that it is excusable or it should have been excused, no. But our own social reformers were campaigning against that. Our own people were saying that this should stop, and it would have stopped, definitely. In the rule of Peshwas, it was banned. Ahilyabai Holkar was very, very strongly against it. Bhagwan Swaminarayan in Gujarat was campaigning against it. So all over India, there were our own social reformers were fighting against it. But these 400 cases a year that used to happen, they started claiming figures like 50,000 widows are burned, 30,000 widows are burned, 80,000 widows are burned every year. So they started blowing up and, claiming any sort of figures just to convince people in UK that there is a need for missionaries to go to India and save Hindus from these practices. So purely out of self-interest, they created this narrative that Hinduism is a morally degraded, downgraded religion. Again, in my book, I have written very in detail about this and proved with concrete evidences that all these stories of widow burning were completely exaggerated only for this purpose. And now coming to the last point, we have been told that India was never a nation, but a group of warring kingdoms. The British unified it, and the founding values of independent India were created by India's non-violent freedom movement. So in essence, we are told that India won its freedom purely because of non-violent movement. अहिंसक मूवमेंट, मतलब चरखा चला के अपने को आजादी मिली, हमको बताया गया है. तो क्या यह सचमुच सही है? Very briefly, I'll tell you, I have written in great detail about how this claim is completely baseless. But let me tell you in short, there were three movements that Congress carried out under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. Three big movements. One was the non-cooperation movement in the years 1920-21, which was essentially a Khilafat movement. It was not a non-cooperation, it was termed a non-cooperation movement, but its purpose was to save the Khilafat in Turkey. So why we were concerned with Khilafat in Turkey no idea. Why Indian Muslims should be so worked up because of end of Khilafat in Turkey, very difficult to say. But Gandhiji unfortunately supported this claim by the Indian Muslims that Khilafat in Turkey should be saved. And he tied up his movement to this Khilafat cause. And this movement started in 1920, and by 1921-22, it had almost it was almost over. Neither Khilafat was saved because the British ended the Khilafat, nor freedom was won, because Gandhiji had said that because of this cause of Khilafat, Hindus and Muslims have come together. So now India will get independence in 1 year. That didn't happen. Khilafat didn't survive. It was a complete failure. That movement was a complete failure. The second big movement that they did was the Dandi Yatra, the salt agitation, as we call it. Mithacha Satyagraha in Marathi, we call it. There again, it was a very big media event all over the world. It gave huge publicity to the non-violent struggle. But after Gandhiji's arrest, it just collapsed. The entire movement finished in next 2 or 3 months. And after the movement, there was a Gandhi-Arvind Pact, in which there was no mention of freedom at all. Even in the demands that were put up, there was no mention of freedom. So freedom was not even an objective of that movement. And in the pact that took place after Gandhiji was released from prison, the tax on salt also was not taken back. So forget independence for the country, but the smallest target of that movement, that the salt was taxed and that tax should be cancelled, was also not accepted. So what a huge failure that movement was. The third movement was 1942. On the 9th of August, it was declared. On the same day, all the leaders were arrested. And there was no plan of how that movement should be carried forward. It was declared in a haste for various purposes. Main purpose was the rising popularity of Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash Chandra Bose was becoming very popular and Congress was doing nothing. So just to show that we are also doing something, this Chale Jao movement was launched. And it was going nowhere. After everybody was arrested, the movement was, because British also were in no mood to mollycoddle the Congress at that time, because they were fighting a world war. So they crushed the movement. Practically, they crushed the movement. And in again a matter of months, that movement was over. So 3 movements they carried out with a gap of 10 years. 1920-21, 1931 and 1942. तो हर 10 साल के बाद जो मूवमेंट होता है उसमें से ऐसा कौन सा प्रेशर क्रिएट हुआ होगा ब्रिटिश राज के ऊपर कि दैट दे फाउंड इट inevitable to give freedom to India. Practically nothing. 3 movements with a gap of 10 years, each movement lasting only a couple of months and completely failing to achieve anything. So how can these 3 movements have led to India's independence? I mean, if you look at it logically, then there is no way that these movements have won independence for the country. And one final proof of this fact is that when Britain gave freedom to India, their Prime Minister was Sir Clement Attlee. And in 1952, he had come back to India and he stayed at Raj Bhavan in Calcutta as a guest of West Bengal's governor. And while talking, governor asked him that in 1947, what was such pressing need that you had to give independence to India? But 1942 movement had in any case collapsed. So he said that we gave independence to India only because of the pressure created by the Indian National Army of Subhash Chandra Bose, which led to revolts like the naval mutiny, which told us that now the Indian army is not going to be loyal to the British. And without their support, Britain can't rule India. So that's why we decided to quit. ये भी मैंने बहुत विस्तार से लिखा है मेरी किताब में. I have written in a very very detailed way, giving all the references and evidences. Non-violent movement was in no way responsible for India's freedom, but Subhash Chandra Bose, Indian National Army, and the situation that was created because of that. Finally, Mr. Governor asked Clement Attlee that what part did Gandhiji's non-violent movement play in your decision to grant India freedom? So he smiled and he said minimal. He said there was a minimal impact of Gandhiji's non-violent movement on their decision. Now, even British Prime Minister who took the decision to grant India freedom, he himself says this, and still we insist that India got freedom because of non-violent movement. I think it's a murder of history, nothing else. So all these wrong narratives and wrong identities that were imposed on us have really seriously damaged our psyche. And it is very, very important to remove these misconceptions, to remove these distortions, and let India stand up as a very, very confident and forward-looking and powerful nation. And for this, ending distortions from history and communicating it to the people, I think that's very important, because एक किताब में वो लिखने से कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. This has to reach the masses, and in that, platforms like yours are going to play a very big role. So I'm very happy that I got this chance to speak to your audiences through your platform. I'm sure we'll continue this this effort. And finally, the textbooks of history will also change, and from there, the narrative will be set which is true and correct. Thank you very much.